Very good morning, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. We are very pleased to welcome everyone to this session, and we do appreciate the fact that we're gathered here today because we want to come together and show leadership as well as support for transformation of the agriculture and food systems sector in the continent. And this time around, we're focusing on the particular region of COMESA. So we're very pleased that we have Her Excellency, the Secretary General of the Common Market for East and Southern Africa, Her Excellency, Madame Chileshe. I would like us to welcome her with a clap. Welcome, Your Excellency. We're also very pleased that we do have, the political leadership in support of today's session. And it's not just about the session, it's about the fact that there's a great commitment, a very deliberate commitment from our honorable ministers, to actually ensure that we are not leaving our populations hungry. And therefore, I would like to specially recognize the Honorable Minister for Trade and Investments from Tanzania. Madam Minister, welcome. The Honorable Minister for Trade from Malawi. You're welcome very much, Honorable Minister. Sir, the Honorable Minister for Agriculture from Zambia. You're welcome, sir. The Honorable Minister for Agriculture from Tanzania. You're welcome, sir. And the Deputy Secretary General for the East African Community. You're very much welcome, sir. Your Excellencies, we do appreciate the fact that you are here today because you do want to let everyone know that you're putting, your commitment to action. I'd like to let us know why we're here in particular. You see, when the COVID-19 hit all of us globally, one of the challenges we did face in the continent as far as food security was concerned was the fact that we could not account for where the food is. And it became an issue. We saw that national strategic food reserves were depleted as a result of the fact that our governments wanted to ensure that if we did have a health problem, let's also not have a food problem as well. But we also saw that a certain number of countries were able to continue with what they were doing because they had systems in place to actually continue ensuring that we had access to food. But a number of countries were taken aback by this shock. A general issue that we saw across board was that, systems were weak and fragile, and it was difficult to make decisions. And because of that, we saw a huge closure of borders. And that means that food was not able to pass through from areas of surplus to areas of deficit. For example, we know that some countries spent at least 7 days to do COVID tests for drivers of trucks, before they could cross the border. And it was impacting on food security. It also impacted on private sector. Private sector lost a lot of money. Farmers did lose a lot of money. Why? Because there was lack of data and evidence to determine what sort of policies to make. So there were very knee-jerk policies like closure of borders, a ban on exports, and all that. And because of that, there was a huge food waste. Because keeping those food for 8, 9, 10 days at the borders, had an impact on markets as well. And because of that, markets became much more dysfunctional than we have always known in these areas. There was also another challenge. The other challenge was that there were questions around where is the data to actually help me make the right decision so that I know what to tell my president as the minister in charge. But in many cases, that data was, that data was either absent or not updated. I'm very pleased to let us know today that our ministers have shown great leadership. And we also thank, Her Excellency, the Secretary General of COMESA, Madame Chilese, for also providing that leadership, working with the governments to develop the regional food balance sheet. And that digital tool is helping us to use technology to actually drive policy, reduce policy unpredictability, and ensure that we're able to tell where the food is, where to move the food, and it then helps our farmers to be able to determine how they can increase their incomes and participate in decision making at the value chain level. But also it supports private sector to be able to buy and sell, and that makes the market predictable, and that helps everybody, because then we're sure people can have access to food and can afford the food that they want to eat. And that overall contributes to food systems transformation and ensure that our economies are growing better. We know that a number of countries in the continent are able to be net exporters, but the regional food balance sheet will provide that support, that data and evidence for our governments to know what they have in stock, what to produce, the quality of nutrition, where to access that food, and to determine price and support market forces as they go forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, we will have this critical discussion today, and we're hoping that with your leadership, we can ensure that the regional food balance sheet is achieved at scale. There are about 7 countries involved now. We want to expand to the entire COMESA region, and we're looking to see that happen, by your thought leadership that you bring, and your experiences actually, in how you have provided leadership and ensure that we're driving food security in our countries. At this point, I will go forward by actually thanking the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office of the United Kingdom for their support. And I'm very pleased, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to have the Acting Head for Economic Development for Africa, Mr. Mansour Ahmad, with us today. Please welcome him. We will now continue by taking a short presentation from the FCDO office, and I do hope that the video can start shortly.
Thank you, Usman. It's a real pleasure to join you all this morning. Excellencies, honourable ministers, Secretaries General, ladies and gentlemen, may I just say all protocols observed. My name's Debbie Palmer. I'm the Africa Director at the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And I'm very excited to be here this morning and to be able to draw on some of the things that Usman has said in his opening remarks, and to draw on some of those themes. Because in May this year, the UK's Foreign Secretary launched our new international development strategy for the UK. And the strategy sets out our future priorities in international development support. It focuses particularly on unleashing the power of people and of countries to take control of their own future. This includes building a really distinct UK offer to support countries to make progress, to secure investment, to build resilient economies and institutions that can unleash their population's potential. So we really believe that protecting, preserving, and importantly promoting African food markets will enable a platform for long-term inclusive and sustainable growth that will in turn empower people and economies across Africa. And as our new Prime Minister said yesterday on her appointment, she stands really strongly for freedom, enterprise, and fair play. And I think you'll feel that come through in the support that we're providing. Now, this 12th annual AGRF Summit and its theme of grow, nourish, reward, bold actions for resilient food systems, that's really very apt. And it's really very timely, especially now when Africa's food and agriculture markets continue to be so badly disrupted by multiple and concatenating crises. As soon as countries started to emerge from the economic disruption and the health tragedy of COVID-19, we've all seen how recovery was hindered as the world entered another, even more disruptive situation. So we've seen the interplay between the global supply and the prices of food and fertilizer and fuel having been exacerbated following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with the spillover impacts that have spread out across the global economy. Global food and fertilizer and fuel prices, we all know, were already very, very high before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but the war has exacerbated all those existing economic fragilities and the food insecurity itself, driven by a combination, as we know, of long-term drivers: climate change, the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course, domestic conflicts and domestic issues. So now we've got at least 147 million people across the continent facing crisis levels of food insecurity. 147 million. Now that's an increase of 20 million since the beginning of this year, with WFP now telling us that this 20 million could rise to 50 million due to rising food prices. So we need to act, we need to come together, we need to have a common plan and a common vision. To address the immediate humanitarian needs, the UK is working closely with our partners and allies to monitor this evolving situation. So since January of this year, the UK has provided £72 million to deliver emergency humanitarian assistance in Ethiopia, in Kenya, in Somalia, and in South Sudan. And this year, we've also contributed £63 million to the UN Central Emergency Response Fund, the CERF. Our Prime Minister pledged at CHOGM, indeed in Kigali earlier in the year, £372 million to provide immediate and longer-term relief to Africa and other countries on the front line of this food crisis that's unfolding. That includes funding to the World Food Programme, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, as well as bilateral support from the UK, such as we're providing £17 million for technical assistance on fertiliser. But the scale of this crisis is unprecedented. And therefore today, I want to call upon countries and regional economic communities, all gathered here, to use their powers and their voices to advocate for keeping food trade flowing. We've got to keep food trade flowing. We need to push back against non-tariff barriers that restrict trade, and we need to improve policies so that countries become more business-friendly and more predictable. And if we can have that business-friendly, more predictable policy environment, that will help provide the stability needed for investors to make investment decisions and bring in private sector financing into this space. There are a range of UK programmes financed by my organisation, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, such as our work to support agricultural breakthroughs. We are supporting the Global Agriculture and Food Security Programme. We are supporting the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, the Africa Food Trade and Resilience Programme, and of course we're supporting and working in partnership with Trademark East Africa. All of these as a collection are helping to build longer-term growth and resilience by supporting innovation, by supporting more predictable policy making, and by investing in gaps in the value chain and overcoming non-tariff barriers in agricultural markets across Africa. So we're really committed to this set of work, and the portfolio of the UK is working to ensure coherent progress to try and protect, to preserve, and to promote African food and agriculture markets. As a partner, the UK is particularly concerned about how the high prices and the lack of availability of fertilizers will impact on future crop yields across Africa. It's something we've spent many months looking at, analysing, assessing, and trying to seek levers to address. And of course, subsequently, if we can't address the fertiliser availability and prices, we're going to see impacts on food supplies and food security down the line. Demand patterns, input availability, and shifting climates are part of the knowledge needed to build future, more resilient food security. So there is a very, very urgent need for African governments to better understand their current and projected food status for each of their nations. So I'm really pleased that today we are discussing how leveraging data can help improve intra-Africa food trade. I'm really proud that the UK is contributing towards building this knowledge base in Africa. For example, the COMESA Digital Regional Food Balance Sheet initiative was born out of a UK programme called the Africa Food Trade and Resilience Programme. This supports the Malabo Declaration's aim to triple intra-Africa trade in agricultural commodities and services by 2025. So we've been working on this for some time, and it's really exciting that this regional food balance sheet has been born and is now really taking shape. Because for most COMESA countries, avoiding disruptions in the food supply chains will be a critical part of building resilience in the region's food systems, both now, but importantly into the future. So I want to pause for a moment here and to publicly thank sincerely our PIATA partners, that's USAID, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Rockefeller, who continue to partner with us to fund that digital regional food balance sheet initiative. The RFBS, the food balance sheet, is currently working in 6 countries. It's in Malawi, Zambia, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda, and it's focused on 3 value chains of maize, beans, and rice. If I may, maybe slightly cheekily in this forum, but I'd also like to lay down a challenge to COMESA, and I know the Secretary General, Honourable Madam Chilesi, I know that you're listening. I'd like to lay down a challenge to COMESA. As the conveners of that regional food balance sheet, I'd like to ask COMESA to do more and to appeal to your member states to start investing in this tool so that they really feel they own it and they make it more comprehensive and more robust. And this will help in increasing both the numbers of products in the food balance sheet as well as the number of participating countries. And if we can do those 2 things, I think it would make the world of difference in terms of driving this tool forward. And I know there's plenty of other regions looking at this with great interest. Finally, if I may, the private sector is so important. Without the private sector and other food market participants, that regional food balance sheet, it simply won't balance. So I really appeal to the private sector to join up and support the building of this data infrastructure that will help drive investment decisions. A well-functioning regional food balance sheet will help African countries bring to life the broader potential benefits of intercontinental trade through, of course, the AFCFTA, which is also such a massive potential and such an important thing for the future of the continent. So the UK embarked on supporting the development of the RFBS due to our path-breaking work to improve market transparency. It's that transparency that will really facilitate a common understanding of food production, of food consumption, and balances for farmers, for traders, for processors, for investors, for governments, for donors, for all of us. That data will allow improved application of evidence-based decision-making. It will lead to more resilience. It will lead to more secure regional food systems. So whilst this effort is currently focused on COMESA, I am genuinely hopeful that the same principles can be applied to develop other regional food balance sheets in future. And as I said, therefore, I'm delighted today that we're focused on how leveraging data can really help improve intra-Africa trade. So with that, thank you for listening. I wish you all the best for the remaining conference, and I really look forward to seeing the benefits arising from leveraging this data to improve intra-Africa food trade. Thank you very much for listening. It's very nice to be with you. I wish I could be there in person.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Debbie Palmer, Director for Africa for the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. Thank you. As we get ready for the panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen, I'll kindly ask you to also start preparing your questions as you listen to our honorable ministers as well. We want to also acknowledge the fact that we're here today because we've got the support through AGRA from the UK Aid, which is the FCDO, from USAID, from the Rockefeller Foundation, as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we do hope that, as we go forward, that our governments will invest, because this is for us, and this is a tool that we can use to drive food security going forward. Now it's time for our esteemed panelists to come off the stage, and I think I will introduce one more person, as we introduce the panelists. I would like to, ladies and gentlemen, for us to please welcome to the stage the Honorable Minister for Trade and Industry in Malawi, Honorable Mark Kabonga Piri. Let's welcome him to the stage, please. Thank you, Honorable Minister. I'd also like us to welcome another panelist, Honorable Dr. Aishatu Kijaji, Minister for Investments, Industry and Trade for Tanzania. Madam Minister, you're very much welcome. I would like to also welcome Honorable Chileshe Kapwepwe, the Secretary General for COMESA. Your Excellency, you're most welcome. I'd like to welcome Ms. Maura Barry Boyle, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator, Bureau for Resilience and Food Security at the United States Agency for International Development. And I'd also like to welcome Johan Swirin. If I missed that surname, please forgive me, the Director General for the International Food Policy Research Institute. Thank you so much. And I would also like to welcome Mr. Mansour Ahmad, who's the Acting Group Economic Development Head, for the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office of the United Kingdom. Let's put our hands together for him as he comes. Okay. Thank you. Panelists, you may please take your seats. Thank you, Honorable Ministers, representatives from our development partners. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin this discussion with the Honorable Minister for Trade in Malawi. That's Honorable Kasonga Piri. I would like to ask you a question, Honorable Minister. How is your country, articulating actions to actually promote open, transparent, and predictable interregional trade, at least within your region, that the rest of the continent can learn from? We know Malawi has shown some level of leadership, but would like to hear from you. How are you doing this? How are you making this happen?
Thank you so much. And I should first of all thank you for inviting Malawi to this very important summit. And at the end of the day, we have been here looking at a variety of issues. And I'm happy now to try and elaborate on a number of things Malawi is doing. First and foremost, we are saying we should expand markets of targeted goods and services beyond COMESA and SADC. You may be aware that we have got these two regional blocks which are working, of course, together to improve the livelihood of the people by making sure that we have got sufficient food and everybody is engaged in the day-to-day activities of their respective countries, but making sure that all those activities are properly coordinated. That is number one. Number two, we are promoting investment in labor markets by building entrepreneurship skills amongst the youth and women in the food production chain. By that I mean women and children, or the youth, play a very, very important role in terms of engaging themselves in a variety of activities at their local level, which builds up to make the big, which supports the whole nation. As critical as it is, food cannot be taken lightly. So while we appreciate that even men get involved in the process, but taking my home experience, women and the youth take the lead. I'm not undermining, what men do, but men, being what they are, in most cases, they get busy with other more important engagements. So Malawi is very busy preparing the youth, supporting the women to make sure that the food production chain is kept alive. We are adopting ICT to harness private sector innovation and efficiency. Food is produced in the field, but for that food to reach the appropriate beneficiaries who are the consumers, there is a chain of activities you have to undertake. Transportation is one of them. That involves a lot of logistics. And at the end of the day, in the IT era, you just have to make sure that you are using your technology to ascertain that the processes are being properly harnessed, are being properly coordinated, and you are doing the right thing at the right time. We are improving cost efficiency of SMEs. The SMEs are the major producers of food. That is taking my home, example. We've got numerous, so many, SMEs engaged in the in the whole food chain. Starting from the production point of view, from the fields, processing, storage, and all that gets involved to make sure that that food is readily available at the right time when it is needed. So this, we are saying, as we are preparing for the Africa continental the Africa continental free trade area implementation, we must be very ready. And we may take it as simple as we think, but it is one thing which needs a lot of proper coordination regionally and at that continental level. So Malawi is very busy getting prepared to make sure that we are not left behind. But at the same time, we are busy sensitizing our neighbors on how we can work together to make sure that CFTA is really working for the benefit of the continent. We are improving cost efficiency in the whole production chain. Lastly, we have effective management and implementation of trade and investment agreements You may be aware that the regional blocs have been working on a number of agreements to make sure that we are working to strengthen the regional bloc. And there are a number of trading blocs in the region. If we don't properly coordinate, these regional blocs, maybe the Africa continental free trade area may not work as we want it to work.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
So at the end of the day, we are now interconnecting the regional blocs to make sure that the Africa bloc becomes real and it works effectively. That's what we are doing so far.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. That's really, really exciting to hear what Malawi is doing. And Malawi is also in my heart, as you know, Honorable Minister.
I'm aware of that.
Thank you.
I'm very much aware of that.
Before we move to the next panelist, I'd like to also welcome online Miss Clara Park from the Food and Agricultural Organization. She's joining us online. Clara, you're very much welcome, and we're happy to have you with us online. This is the beauty of technology, and we're discussing technology, to drive data systems for intra-Africa food trade. So thank you for joining. I'm sure you can see the other panelists as well. I would like to move to you, Honorable Minister Dr. Kijaji. We know that these shocks like the COVID and as well as the crisis in Europe has actually had an impact on food, on markets, on especially on cost of food, and other related issues, even the cost of medicines. How is Tanzania, your country, able to be coping with getting agri-data to inform, your food trade that you do within your country, especially as your ministry provides that strategic direction and the policy, within what you do in your leadership role as the minister, I would also like to find out from you, what should be done actually to ensure that both public and private sector players can have access to agri-systems data to improve food trade from your country and across the region.
Thank you so much, Dr. Polo, for engaging me in this discussion, and thank you for the question that you have posed. I can say that one thing that we shouldn't underestimate is the importance of data in making decisions. So really, before you make any decision, before you make any plans, you need to have data in your hands. And not only data, you need to have reliable and valid data in your hands. And as you have said, yes, with the shocks that is happening in the world, it started with it 2019 to date, the world is not that much stable. Really, we need to plan ourselves and see how we can move forward. And as we know, particularly Tanzania, in my country, in agriculture, we really depend on small scale and medium scale farmers. So really we need to engage them to have a continuous supply, a continuous production activities so that we can have a resilient food system in the country. So from this, as we understand, yes, we had COVID-19 since 2019, 2020, and as you mentioned, the geopolitics that is happening in the world. Really, in Tanzania, we decided, regardless of the shocks that is happening in the world, we have to consistently engage in production, particularly in agricultural activities. So that's engagement is one thing, continuous engagement, so that we can have food supply. And when we engage, as you have said, we really need to have data to inform traders, but to inform the government to make decisions. And this continuous engagement in production activities, it made us Tanzania to have a surplus in food that we have, that we use to also to save our neighboring countries, because we even having the COVID-19, we didn't stop producing, so we found ourselves having the surplus in the produces from the agriculture. And in that, we made another step ahead. How can we keep the data? We introduced in 2015, we started with the Parliamentary Act that enabled us to establish the Warehouse Receipt Regulatory Body, which is a web-based system that enables us and enables our farmers, either individually or through their associations, to record daily their production, to record so that it can be seen through the government, but also with our private sector, so that we can make accurate decisions with the accurate data in hand. So these warehouses also are owned. Coming to your second question that you have posed, these warehouses are owned by the government, but also are owned by the private sector. So in that case, we need to work together so that we can map together and understand what do we have in these warehouses. Regardless its ownership, either by the government or the private sector, we need to work together so that we can have informed decisions, understanding in which area, in which region in our country, what do we have, what producers do we have, what type of products do we have either in region A or in district A, so that we can make the right decision in trade but also in planning purposes. So this is something that we have made, but also in the government, this year, 2021-2022 financial year, we decided at least to introduce in all local government authorities to have departments that deals with the trade, investment, and industry. This department is specifically, it deals with making sure that in each day they record what type of products do we have in all the markets in the country. Why are we doing this? Because we want to understand. We want to know what do we have, what surpluses do we have, so that we can continue making the right decisions in trade, but also in investment. This is what we have been doing to make sure that we have accurate data in our country. Thank you, Apollo.
Thank you, Dr. Kijaji. Very important points, and complementary to what Honorable Piri made when he did share about Malawi. So we see coordination, we see the involvement of youth and women, we see the fact that you took on institutional reforms and you digitized your warehouse receipt systems and made it data-driven. That's absolutely very important. Thank you, Dr. Kijaji and Honorable Firi. I would like to move to you, Madame Johan Swimen, the Director General of IFPRI. IFPRI has shown very great leadership globally in ensuring that you're producing, very helpful thought leadership, driving knowledge, data and analysis that has helped to inform decision-making amongst governments and, of course, amongst other policymakers who are supporting and advising governments. From IFPRI's analysis, I would like to ask, what are the major challenges that you think, from what you've seen, Africa is facing in the wake of these shocks and might persist in the years ahead? We also know that the IMF had also done an analysis and said, hey, we are going to see a number of these issues affecting trade and economic growth up till 2025, right? The World Bank similarly has said the same. But from your analysis, what do you think are the challenges that Africa will continue to face for some time to come in the light of these shocks? And what do you think should be done, to ensure that countries implement some of the commitments they have made, or signed up to at the regional level, for example, in having an integrated trade area, that is data-driven?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for this question. Actually, it's a whole set of questions, and I'm not sure if I can deal satisfactorily within the short time here. Let me make a couple of points. Obviously, we are not decision makers. We are an institution which works together with many African institutions in collecting data and analyzing them, and in that way contributing to the debate, but also providing better indicators, I think, better material, better the basis for making correct decisions. From our analysis, what we've done, okay, is that COVID-19 has obviously had a very important role, as you have very well documented in the opening statements, but there are structural elements in hindering African trade which are there before and after COVID-19. If you look at the actual trade, our recent indicators show that actually trade, there's good news, okay? So the trade is actually much larger than is recorded in the official statistics. Our estimates show that they are even up to 50 times as large in some cases, if you really account correctly for the informal trade which is taking place. And I think that's really important to know. It also signals that the trade area, if you want, the trade activities in Africa and the interregional trade are much stronger, okay, much more vibrant than have been recorded so far in the actual or the formal statistics. Another point, I think, where the news is a bit less good is in the trade barriers that exist. There are a number of these. Some are formal, like tariffs, for example, but there are also a number which are of trade barriers which are much harder to measure. In particular, I think it has to do with institutions, infrastructure. We have collected data on how many controls there are, for example, for trucks to go across the road to the border, etc. In some countries, like, for example, Togo, we see that per 100 kilometers there's 19 control points. Obviously, this is having a major impact both in terms of actual dollars or what local currency spent, but also in terms of the opportunity cost. These are large. And I think your example of the COVID-19 testing is another example of this for another reason. I think my last point in this, yes, and so our estimates, we have tried to estimate some of these trade barriers, and we see the cost varies strongly from country to country. Our estimates vary from 5% to actually 25 to 30%, and that obviously makes quite a bit of difference. You have to compare that with actual tariffs. My last point then has to do with non-tariff measures, the standards, if you want, that are imposed on trade. It's a very complex issue, and it's something which is not only something where Africa is having a difficult time dealing with, but it is globally. I mean, the number one and number two countries which are complaining about non-tariff barriers to each other is actually the US and the EU. Okay, so they're both the countries which receive most of the complaints and actually are launching most of the complaints in the WTO on this. It's a complex issue because you want standards, okay? SPS and TBT are good for trade because you want to have controls on that, safety standards, etc. At the same time, they can be abused for protecting domestic sectors, etc., for a number of reasons. Our estimates, these are early estimates, put basically these non-tariff barriers, if you want, at somewhere between 20% and 70% for different sectors, for different countries. So they're very sizable. But again, it's a very complex issue, and I think clearly there's a lot more work to be done there. Let me leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joanne. And we will continue to work with IFPRI because of IFPRI's very strong leadership in providing analytics data, as well as, you know, making very clear and thoughtful recommendations based on evidence that do support governments. So thank you so much. I will turn to you, Your Excellency, Madame Chileshe. We know that you and your team have actually been able to support and, or rather lead, you know, our governments, some of them which are sitting here, to develop this digital food balance sheet. My question to you, Your Excellency, is how impactful do you think this is for intra-Africa trade from where you sit as leading COMESA, which is quite complex, leading a market organization that supports governments? I'm sure you're dealing with a lot of politics, and but what do you think this will do to help you deliver more for the member states and for Africa as far as food trade is concerned. And we know that a lot of the member states actually did sign up to this. How do you think they can effectively implement these commitments that they've signed up to ensure that we're improving intra-Africa trade for food and agriculture, but also that we are, promoting economic growth from where you sit?
Thank you very much, Apollos, for that question. And firstly, let me say I'm very delighted to be part of this very important conversation, and I thank AGRA for bringing us together. The digital regional food balance sheet, which we are developed in conjunction with yourself, and of course, let me also recognize the other partners which were mentioned before, the UK government, US government through USAID, the two foundations, Rockefeller and Bill and Melinda Gates. This is a very practical tool which will be at the disposal of the member states to ensure that the players in the productive sector, which is agriculture, have information. As you know, there is the Continental Free Trade Area Framework, which has removed the tariffs. We're looking at removing non-tariff barriers and all the other barriers to trade. But at the end of the day, we also have to address the practical side of how do we move from having a very good framework, which is there for us to use, to actual tools which will impact on how decisions are made, for example, by the producers, the farmers, the governments who are concerned about food security, investment into agriculture. If they have information that is clear, predictable, and can be used for planning, then I think we'll have more players coming to support, ultimately, to increase the productive capacity of our sector so that we can increase Africa, intra-regional and indeed intra-Africa trade. Currently, it's still a lot of potential for us to grow in this sector. I think you heard from the presentation earlier that the Malabo Declaration aspiration was very ambitious to increase agriculture production, or to triple it by 2025. I think we're still very far from there. So what we need is to unpack this, have very practical ways to support governments, players, to have a useful tool like this balance sheet. Now, we have balance sheets before, they've been there, but the particular, I think, advantage of this one is it's leveraging on technology, so that we can use almost real-time information to continually update the information that's available on the balance sheet. Who is producing what, where are they producing it, where are the stocks. I can plan my production because I can see from the balance sheet telling me where the deficits and surpluses are. That also talks to food security as well. So it's a very practical tool, which I'm hoping that will be able to expand beyond the 6 members that have signed on already, which are Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda, Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia. And the 3 main products, which are rice, beans, and maize. So the feedback we'll get from the users, initial users, will allow us to improve on this and to have much more buy-in from other players in the sector. When you deal with a region of 21 member states, of course, you'll have to start with the first movers, and therefore, this is what we've done in this particular case. It's a very practical, very exciting tool for me, and I accept the challenge that has been, I was called by name to make sure that I get others on board and to make sure that I get the interest of the member states themselves to put in the resource and therefore own it. And I think when we demonstrate the practical advantages and positive results of this initiative, I'm sure we'll have a lot more people and a lot more countries signing on to support this very important initiative.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We will continue to look to your leadership to support and ensure that member states actually live up to this commitment. So you are actually the first ambassador of this tool, because you're going to take it round, not just within COMESA, but to your brothers and sisters in ECOWAS and in the other parts of the continent. So thank you so much. I would like to actually turn to you, Ms. Maura Boyle from USAID. I know that you have also demonstrated great commitment and support to this continent in various ways, and particularly to COMESA for the digital food balance sheet. So thank you for that. I think it's important to continue having you, provide that support. My question to you is, what do you see as the US government's priorities in Africa in view of actually emerging markets as well as supporting, addressing or mitigating the shocks like the food crisis we're seeing as a result of the crisis in Europe or the conflict in Europe, and in the light of some of the impacts that we've seen on our economies, particularly in food and agriculture as a result of COVID-19. What do you see is your government support, and how do you hope to ensure that your support is leveraging on Africa's leadership to improve food trade within the continent?
Thank you, Apollo, for that question, and it's great to be part of this discussion today. And I'd like to start off by just sharing a story, because I had lunch yesterday with the Minister of Agriculture from Uganda, and I was reminded of this story. When I started my career in international development over 3 decades ago, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya, and I visited a border post, a border with Uganda in a place called Busia. I went with a fellow Peace Corps volunteer on her picky, and we went across the border, which was a stick that lifted like this. And there was mainly pickies. On the Uganda side, it was bodas, right? The border, and lots of bicycles. And then I had the opportunity in 2019 to visit that border post again, so many decades later. And to see that transformation was incredible. In fact, they had a picture hanging up, a small black and white photo of the early days. It made me feel very old when I looked at it, but it was a great opportunity to meet with traders. I met with a lot of women who are running small enterprises, and to hear from them their challenges, but also to see all of the opportunity that has come on that border. We know, and we're having this discussion about how important analysis is, how important data is. Feed the Future, which is a US government initiative responding to the food security challenges here globally, was launched and was born out of the crisis in 2007 and 2008. And at that time, we know through analysis for our partnership with IFPRI, how countries really put up trade barriers at that time, and it had such a negative impact on economies across the globe and many here in Africa. And then fast forward to the pandemic, and we're able to see that the number of countries in Africa that actually put up barriers had reduced substantially. And we believe, and through our analysis of IFPRI and other partners, that was because governments had information, private sector had information, and they could make smart decisions and know that it would be more beneficial to keep the borders open, to keep things movement, and to make investments along those lines. Right now, the US is really responding, I think, quite strongly to this food security crisis. It's top of mind for our government. We heard commitments from President Biden back at the Food Security Summit. And also, because of the data and the analysis that we've had, we've been able to talk to our Congress, and through a supplemental last May, we received $763 million in addition to the $1 billion we were spending this year on food security. And half of that, 763 roughly, is going to Africa. And honestly, it's because of the analysis, the information we have, to have those discussions, that we're able to engage more fully with partners in Africa. So we also were able to expand the number of countries we're working in here in Africa. And we can make those decisions based on analysis and data. We continue to support initiatives and work through important African partners like Academia 2063, who is really doing some innovative work along those lines, including the recently, I think in 2019, they launched their African Agricultural Trade Monitor, which is a really awesome product. They also have the Resacks and other products. And I'll just add to, we've been having this conversation all week about the 3 C's or the 4 C's, COVID, climate, conflict, cost of living, the 3 F's, the rising prices in food, fertilizer, and fuel. We talked about AAA, action, action, action. So when we talk about action, 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 I'd like to add 3 I's, and that is innovation and investment, which I think this week is all about, and which trade is all about. Innovation and investment. But the 3rd I would add as an important part of that conversation is inclusion. And I think we really need to, we know that our investments are going to be all the stronger if they're more inclusive. We need to have women at front and center of this and make sure that we're working with not just paying attention to the smallholder farmers who are more than 50% women, but the small and medium and large enterprises that are run by women to have a more impactful progress. So that's what I would say. I think our priorities, we stay engaged very much in this space of partnering on analysis and data to address the current crisis that's at us. So thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to the conversation.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Very, very insightful comments and very helpful to know that the US government remains committed to supporting data-driven systems as well as driving innovation, for economic growth. And we're very happy that that's based on evidence, because that's important, and that's why this digital food balance sheet exists, is because we want to make sure that our governments are making decisions based on evidence and can drive innovation going forward. I would like to turn to you, Mr. Ahmed. I know you've been very, very passionate about this work, and your support is greatly appreciated, as FCDO. From where you sit as the group head, for economic development for Africa, we would like to understand what your priorities are as a government, in supporting African countries to actually mitigate the impact of these shocks that are actually, causing a food crisis. Like when Debbie Palmer spoke earlier, she talked about the fact that, we've seen the statistics, hunger has increased by, more than 20 million people. And if we do not address this, we're likely to see 50 more million people hungry within the continent before the end of this year. This is September. The time is, and the clock is ticking rather, So from your perspective, what do you think, your government will do more to provide that support? And how do you think you can leverage on the African government's leadership in driving, agri-data systems, the digital food balance sheet in particular, to improve food security and drive economic growth?
Thank you, Dr. Nwafo. For me, it's quite simple. I don't know if is the mic working?
Yes, it's working, yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Nwafo, for that question, or set of questions. Again, for me, it's quite simple. The question around what are our priorities, that's not the question. It's what is the priorities of the African continent and the African leaders, and how can we, in our contribution from the UK, support in realizing those priorities. And as Debbie alluded to earlier, we're here ready to partner and support our African governments and leaders in realizing those. And in light of that, just this morning there was a breakfast meeting which the chair of AGRA, His Excellency Haile Mariam, was present at, where he educated us on a Amharic proverb. And that proverb, I won't say in Amharic, which my Amharic doesn't exist at the moment. The proverb was, it takes many to tame a lion. The regional food balance sheet is a critical pillar of enabling food security and food trade for not just the African continent, but is also something that can be replicated elsewhere. And I'm really grateful for the leadership of COMESA, who are driving this agenda forward and convening us other stakeholders to try and tame this lion. And within that context, we also have to remember farming, agriculture is a commercial endeavor. And any commercial endeavor requires data to enable the right information. Equally, it's an endeavor that requires effective policy making, which also requires critical data and information to enable the right decision making. And so all of that together is something which the digital regional food balance sheet is playing a key role in. But that also needs to be done in a way that recognizes what is that long-term vision for the continent, for the region, for enabling the appropriate action towards food market resilience. And it's within that context that we continue to look at the priorities that the governments are setting. So we heard yesterday at the African Agriculture Ministerial Roundtable, with such conviction each of the plans the Ministers of Agriculture have across the continent. We are familiar with the Malawi Declaration, and the Honourable Secretary General for COMESA also mentioned the continent is quite far away from that mandate of tripling food productivity. And so the vision is clear, it's there, and so our priority is to see where we can support and add value to enabling governments and the continent to realize that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmad. Very, very helpful comments. And we continue to appreciate and value the support of your government to ensure that we are dealing with the impacts of food insecurity in the continent. I think I hear you very well. It's an African agenda. It's not an external agenda. And we do readily appreciate and understand that it has to be led by Africa, supported by the rest of us in making sure that we realize Africa's agenda for ending food insecurity and hunger in our continent. I would like to turn to you, Ms. Clara Park, as the Senior Gender Officer for the Food and Agricultural Organization. We know you've done a lot. In fact, for the digital food balance sheet, we actually started out using FAO's, trying to access FAO's historical data, which was really helpful, in building up what we have today as the food balance sheet for COMESA. So I think we do understand that, for many people, data is just about the numbers. But from where you sit, how can we improve or ensure, rather, that the data is inclusive and supports inclusive or supports decisions that are inclusive, in ensuring food security for everyone, as well as improving trade, for agriculture and food?
Thank you, Chair, for the question, and thank you to the organizers for having me here today. It's a pleasure to join you, though virtually, in this important discussion. I agree with you that, and with all the speakers before me, that there's a huge untapped potential for agri-food trade in the continent, which really needs to be unlocked by evidence and robust data-based policies and investments. Currently, Africa, including North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, is a net importer of food, importing about 80 billion US dollar worth of agri-foods annually, especially processed food, while exporting only 60 billion. So we really need the data and evidence to support putting in place the right policies and measures to build a more efficient, resilient, and inclusive agri-food system, and increase intra-Africa trade can really be a key, play a key enabling role in support of this food system transformation agenda. FAO has been working very closely with our member countries and partners to support the preparedness of the agriculture sector to the opportunities and challenges offered by the AFCFTA implementation. From where we see it and from the perspective of our member countries, from the discussions that we've been having with partners, the AFCFTA is not just about trade and service liberalization, it's really a development project. And as you mentioned and other speakers before me have mentioned, inclusion and making sure that whatever we put in place does not leave anyone behind, but really seizes the opportunity offered to empower our rural women and youth is a very key important dimension of the work that we do. In fact, we've been promoting, we have a flagship program at the moment, which in collaboration with the International Trade Center, to promote women and women's groups, producers, processors, traders, small entrepreneurs, to engage in the discussions, navigate the agreement, really understand, build their capacity also to sit at the negotiation table, but also improve their capacity to move up regional value chains and opportunities that are offered in agribusiness. We also have another flagship program with the International Agri-Food Network, which supports building the capacity of women entrepreneurs in the agri-food space by coupling them with mentors who are seasoned or mid-career professional from the agro-food sector. So increasing their capacity, their exposure, and also promoting networking amongst them. In terms of youth, FAO has been working very closely with the African Union to implement several initiatives promoting youth employment and empowerment in agri-food systems, including recently the development of investing guidelines for youth in agri-food systems in Africa, which provides very practical how to guidelines on how to design youth-sensitive investment program. Going back briefly to the issue of data, I would like to mention that in addition to the global goods and available open source database that you also mentioned, FAO is now working to, let's say, to upscale and couple the availability and of data with innovating technologies. So bringing data and technology to really strengthen not just the FAO capacity, but also make available the instrument to design more targeted agriculture intervention. And here I'm referring to the hand-in-hand geospatial platform, which provides millions of layers of data from different sources and also addressing different sectors that can help design targeted investments. But just to finish off, I cannot really emphasize enough, and I couldn't agree more on the importance of really not just engaging and making sure that they participate, but also making sure that women and youth can become real actors in the food system transformation agenda. So really sitting at the table where decisions are made. And I'll stop here for now.
Thank you, Clara. That's really very helpful. Due to time, I would like to actually say to our panelists, I think we've actually had very, very helpful and insightful, thoughts from you. One of them is when we started speaking, and I'll start from where Clara stopped about, looking at data that's inclusive and ensuring that we are supporting the right institutions to deliver on their mandate, like the African Union, and of course, other institutions that have been established like COMESA And that speaks to also what Honorable Piri had said in his opening statement around coordination, around inclusion as well. Thank you, Honorable Kijaji, for actually making us understand that, platforms like the warehouse receipt systems can be digitized, web-based, taking in data that's updated daily, and that, with that, we could use that to build on and strengthen, the digital food balance sheets. Thank you, Honorable Chileshe, for the fact that, we see that you have committed yourself, to demonstrating leadership and working with the member states, to ensure that they meet up to these commitments and are implementing. Thanks also to Mr. Ahmad of FCDO, Ms. Boyle of USAID, for the fact that you will continue to support an African agenda. And that's important, because it has to be an African agenda. And I'm very happy that our honorable ministers here have demonstrated that it is an African agenda, and we will continue to work with you to make that happen. Thank you, Ifpri, Johan, for your very excellent remarks and the fact that you will continue, to provide that thought leadership that's important, for all of us as we begin to ensure that we have data-driven agri-systems. We're making the right decision with the right data, and that we're seeing changes. So we're hoping that one of the things that will happen is that instead of food insecurity to increase by another 50 million, it's going to drop by another 50 million. That's what we're hoping, right? And I can hear Honorable Piri whispering yes. So I will be coming back to all of you for your leadership. For us in AGRA, we will continue to provide that support. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to please thank Her Excellency, Honorable Ministers, and all our panelists for their very wonderful remarks and support. I'd like us to take a very quick photograph before we launch the food balance sheet. You take that seat in, my apologies. Thank you. So we will take a few photographs, and then we will invite the other ministers and the Deputy Secretary General of EAC to join the panel here to launch the regional food balance sheet led by Her Excellency Madame Chileshe, the Secretary General of COMESA. So the cameras, please go ahead. You've got 1 second. We are late with time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Honorable Ministers, we will like to invite to join us here and take the podium briefly with just 2 minutes of statements in support for the regional food balance sheet. Honorable, Hussein Mohamed Bashi, the Honorable Minister for Agriculture from Tanzania. Let's welcome the Honorable Minister for Agriculture. And we will also like to welcome the Minister for Agriculture for Zambia, Honorable Ruben Ntolo Piri. Welcome, Honorable Minister, and I would like us to welcome the Deputy Secretary General for EAC, Honorable Christopher Bazivamo. Right, and to launch the food balance sheet, we would like to still thank our colleagues from FCDO, USAID, and IFPRI, and we will be happy, or rather, we will be happy to not put further burden on your time and excuse you from the stage. Thank you. Thank you, Mansour. Thank you, Maura. Thank you, Johan. We appreciate this. Great. So we would like Honorable Minister for Agriculture in Tanzania to please take your seat, and the Honorable Minister for Agriculture from Zambia. We do hope you've taken your seats. For us, I'd like to say this about, the food balance sheet before we do lunch. Yes, I'm very happy to know that we can go ahead with the lunch. As ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, Honorable Ministers, I'd like to welcome the President for the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, who leads AGRA's great work in the continent, Dr. Agnes Kalibata. Let's welcome her, please. Thank you, Dr. Kalibata. Thank you. We will kindly go forward by inviting Dr. Kalibata to make a few remarks before we get into the lunch. Dr. Kalibata, please.
Thank you, Apollos. Yeah, thank you. This is working. Thank you, Apollos.
Yes.
Honorable Secretary General, COMESA, Honorable Deputy Secretary General, East African Community, Honorable Ministers, we are really honored and really happy to be with you here today. If there's one thing that we've come to understand as we struggle to try to move the agricultural sector forward and food systems forward, is the ability to give a farmer a market. So for me, everything is about markets for farmers. If we can make that market for farmers work, we can make nearly everything happen. So that's the opportunity trade offers. And we really look forward to this regional food balance sheet as a mechanism of catalyzing the ability for farmers to access markets, the ability for us to understand the challenges we have around markets, and the ability for us to work together to keep resolving those challenges. So as AGRA, we have an opportunity to be able to work with you all and try to understand how we bring things together and continue supporting countries and COMESA and East African community to understand how we can support you. We are the only institution here that doesn't have a big mandate like all of you. Our job is just to help you make it happen. And we are very excited about that opportunity that you give us. So really, those are my words. Just anytime you feel like you need AGRA to be there, we'll be there to help and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kalibata. Let's put our hands together if we're doing that. It is under her leadership that we have seen the regional food balance sheet, coming to light today. So thank you for your leadership, Madam President. I would like to also kindly ask the Honorable Minister for Trade, Honorable Piri from Malawi, to make a few remarks.
Thank you so much. It is an honor for me today to preside over the launch of the Regional Food Balance Sheet here at the 12th Annual Agricultural Green Revolution Forum, AGRF. Let me start by expressing my profound gratitude to the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa and COMESA for leading the initiative to develop the regional food balance sheet. Let me also thank the government of Rwanda for hosting this important event. Almost all the countries are covered under the regional food balance sheet. Program have developed national food balance sheets, which is a very important and pleasant development. The national food balance sheets presents a comprehensive picture of the pattern of a country's food supply during a specific reference period and shows for each food item the potential quantities available for human consumption and the source of supply. National food balance sheets have proved useful over the years because they provide information on consumption trends and patterns and food supply. national food balance sheets information is standardized and freely available for more than 245 countries, which allows for comparison. As such, national food balance sheets have played an important role when formulating national food-related policies, including trade-related policies. However, national food balance sheets have their own challenges. First, although national food balance sheets are updated annually, there is a time lag in reporting, which limits the use of national food balance sheets for the real-time decision-making. Secondly, the quality and coverage of national food balance sheets also varies across countries and various commodities. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed the data gaps in national food balance sheets, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. It is against this background that the COMESA Council of Ministers in 2020 directed the COMESA Secretariat to implement a COMESA-wide regional food balance sheet initiative, which is being launched today. The regional food balance sheet uses data from a variety of public and private sources to develop near real-time and forward-looking food balance estimates. The regional food balance sheet will inform data-driven decisions around production support, trade policy, and stock management by governments, business decision makers, and investment by the private sector, and food assistance by donors and emergency response organizations. The regional food balance sheet is expected to promote the Africa Continental Free Trade Area as per data by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. Trade between African nations in agriculture products as a percentage of Africa's total agricultural trade remains below 20%, which is one of the lowest in the world. Even total trade between African nations is low. Total trade amongst African nations was only 2% in the period 2015 to 2017, compared with 67% in trade between European countries, 61% in Asian countries, and 47% in the Americas. To this end, the need to improve and increase agricultural trade in Africa cannot be overemphasized. And that's why the implementation of initiatives like regional food balance sheets comes at the right time. It is in agriculture that the African CFTA's aspirations can be realized, especially by strengthening regional value streams integrated into priority products, led by a diverse private sector inspired by small business owners, commercial farmers, miners, and operators. Platforms such as the RFBS are initiatives that will aid in the realization of the continental trade and economic development aspirations of Africa. The operationalization of the regional food balance sheet will go a long way in assisting the formulation of policies in order to ensure that the region, and indeed the whole Africa, is food secure, and that agriculture trade and investment is enhanced. As earlier highlighted, regional food balance sheets will enable predictability of food trade and food security decision-making. I wish to make a request that to achieve all this, we need a lot of capacity building for our agriculture and trade officials to be able to undertake the analysis as well as teach others. There is also need to agree at how often should this exercise be done to bring about the necessary results that we want in decision making. Let us also help those countries which are with porous borders deal with the accuracy of the data we capture about this exercise. I am bringing this issue to your attention from the practical point of view as Malawi, because of the challenges in the data that sometimes has not been as perfect. As I conclude, I would like to convey my heartfelt gratitude to COMESA through the Secretary General here, who is hosting the platform. Development of the platform was supported by a range of analytical and technology partners, including Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development, NASA, Harvest, UMD Bureau for Food and Agriculture Policy at Tetra Technology, amongst other key data providers in the region. Let me also acknowledge development partners who are supporting this project, including the UK government, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the United States Agency for International Development, USAID. Let me also thank the 6 countries that were involved in the pilot phase of the program, including Malawi, Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Zambia, and Tanzania. Without your cooperation, development of this regional food balance sheet would not be possible. Finally, may I urge you all to make use of the regional food balance sheet as envisioned by the COMESA Council of Ministers in 2020. It will be meaningless to develop this platform and not utilize it. A lot of resources and efforts will be wasted if this is not utilized. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I will kindly ask the Honorable Minister for Tanzania, Honorable Bashi, for Agriculture of Tanzania, apologies, to kindly make a remarks within the space of 1 minute. Please, sir, just a minute.
Thank you, Moderator. Excellent Secretary General of COMESA, Deputy Secretary General of EAC, my sister, President of AGRA, my colleague ministers, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just use maybe less than 1 minute by saying AGRA and other partners, thank you for bringing up this thing. And on behalf of the Minister of Agriculture in the United Republic of Tanzania, we commit to make this thing happening, and we will work together to make sure that the regional food balance sheet is coming into action. And my biggest reason is this is the best platform to transform the agriculture sector to become a real business and deal for the Africa. And we should remember that when we are developing this regional food balance sheet platform, Africa is the basket of the entire world, 60% of the arable land for the agriculture. We can feed the world when we have the reliable data, reliable information, and transparent. And this will give us more edge, more value to our farmers, to our business people in the agricultural sector. Lastly, I thank this panel, and I thank everyone that the narration of smallholder farmers is transforming into narration of small, medium enterprise and recognizing that their job is a business like any other business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely, Honorable Minister. Lovely. I really am excited with those comments. Can I move to you within the space of 1 minute? Honorable Ruben Ntolo, the Minister for Agriculture for Zambia. You've just got a minute, please, sir.
Thank you very much, Moderator. Your Excellencies, invited ladies and gentlemen, we've been given less than a minute, so I'll be straight to the point. What we are launching today will provide the real access for trade engagement among us, the member states. We are happy as Zambia that we became focal in the arrangement, and I want to echo what my colleagues have said, take them as my own, but add that trade will be made easier with the food balance. We will know where to take what crop and sell it where among us ourselves. We can't have a better arrangement. Thank you for the digitalization, for the technology that we have put in information gathering. That is the way to go, Africa. This is a lovely day, and we should all celebrate this innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Ntolo. I really appreciate that. I think colleagues in Agra will be very happy to hear this from you. I'll move to Your Excellency, Honorable Chileshe, for your review before we, your few comments before we actually launch.
Thank you very much, Apollos, for this opportunity. First, I think the balance sheet, for me, demonstrates 4 clear areas of coming together. Firstly, it's about partnership. And it's been demonstrated that this could not have happened without the partnership between Commerce and Agra, and also the support that we received from the development partners, which we have heard today and are clear who they are. Secondly, it's about the strength of innovation and technology. There's always been food balance sheets, but this one is different in that it's leveraging on innovation and technology. Technology meaning you can access the information that you want to feed into the balance sheet in a much more efficient way, in a much more real time, using even digital imaging to predict, for example, crop production, where the commodity is, who is producing what. So using the power of technology, leveraging on that is very, very important for this particular project. Then that leads me to the power of information. Again, the information that it's correlated, it's not standalone and everybody producing in their own nation, but a consolidated position, which then speaks to decision makers, not only governments, not only the farmers themselves, which at the end of the day is what we're trying to do to inform. Why should I produce? Who is going to buy my crop? So the power of information, which also brings policy, targeted policy formulation, and also inclusiveness, like we've talked about, not only from the production of the information side, but from the access of information aspect, much more easier to access, even right down through the whole value chain, even to the SMEs, which I'm very happy to acknowledge that the farmers are also SMEs. The startup farmers are not. We tend to think they're about business, and this is not business of agriculture. So the accessing information is also important to be across the board and be inclusive. And lastly, I think, which is very important going forward for me, and I think it's been raised very succinctly in this meeting, the power of ownership. And I think when we talk about will it be used or not, if there is ownership, it will definitely be used. And I think that when we invite the rest of the member states to participate and to own it, we will see that it is shaped by the owners themselves. What else can we add that is missing? And that ownership element is really, for me, going forward, a very real area of focus, which I hope that, coupled with the power of partnership and all the other elements that I've raised will bring us to a position of having a real useful tool that helps us to unlock and scale up intra-Africa trade. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I have been advised and guided that you should please rise. All of you honorable ministers should please rise, and we will, launch this under the banner. The cameras, the photographers, those who are doing the videos, I would encourage you to quickly come forward because we're just going to do this within the space of 2 minutes. And I would kindly ask you, Excellency, Honorable Ministers, Dr. Kalibata, to please come together under this. Dr. Kalibata will stand beside you, Honorable Your Excellency, and then the other ministers will surround both of you. Right. We want to say thank you to AGRA under Dr. Kalibata's leadership, and thank you to Honorable Chileshe for your leadership in guiding COMESA, to make this happen. So, Excellency, Honorable Ministers, Dr. Kalibata, ladies and gentlemen, the Regional Food Balance Sheet is launched. Thank you. So I'd like to thank all of you. Okay, so Your Excellency, could you please, I've been advised further, you could move to your right, all of you, to your left, sorry, to where the ribbon is. That's fine. This way. We didn't see this, did we? Okay, good. Yeah, you please join her. Ministers, please. Yeah, join her. Thank you. And where are my colleagues? I would like to ask. Yes, that's the ribbon there. Yes, to cut it. So we will give some space for the cameras and the scissors and everything. Thank you. And this is for you. Thank you. Yes. And Your Excellency, to you and all the ministers, here's a copy of the guidance on the food balance sheet. Thank you. What? Thank you. It's done. Okay. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you can now go on the website. You can ask AGRA's head of regional food trade, and they will show you how to access that data on the website. Thank you, everyone, and do have a good afternoon.